Hey everyone, welcome back to another breakdown of Jordan Peele's The Twilight Zone. This is episode 7, Not All Men.
Now, there are spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen the episode yet, get your ass to Mars.
Mars was last week. This episode was written by Heather Ann Campbell and directed by Christina Cho. This story follows a small town that's hit with a meteor shower that taints its water supply and spreads infection across the entire town, affecting the men and bringing out the worst in them. Or so it seems.
This episode had a great cast starring Thaisa Farmiga, Ray Seahorn, Luke Kirby, and Ike Barinholtz. The episode is very loosely based on the 1977 story The Screwfly Solution by Alice Sheldon, also known by the pen name James Tiptree Jr., in which a disease actually does drive men insane.
We have to begin the immediate evacuation of the female population.
Before we jump into Easter eggs and references and some of our favorite moments from the episode, what are your overall thoughts?
Solid episode. I really loved it. And just like Replay, you got a strong message with a strong cast, and it's firmly placed in the horror genre, so I'm there. This took another important subject matter and dropped it right into the horror realm. Like most great horror, the calm before the actual storm can be just as unsettling. I honestly felt that this was a great B-movie style horror trip. It has shades of The Signal, The Stuff, King's Needful Things, a bunch of Romero, and 1958's The Blob. And to be honest, just like in Replay Again, this one felt like a Jordan Peele Twilight Zone episode where it felt like it was in his heightened reality, just like in Get Out and Us. Like seriously, this could be a great B-movie. I would watch it.
I'm totally with you. Along with Replay, this is Peele's Twilight Zone in peak form. Once again, it tackles another of the most important issues still persisting in our modern times. We hesitate to describe this episode as feminist, but by indicting toxic masculinity, it is an allied message. The acculturation of men into a mindset of resolving conflict through violence, whether physical or mental, and that doing so is virtuous, is reinforced throughout most of American, if not global, media.
Why do you guys always want to kick ass?
Because we're dudes.
That there are so few narratives which confront this, and even fewer that offer alternatives, justifies the existence of this entry in the series. The masterstroke here is the episode's punchline, that the terrible behavior was ultimately voluntary. The meteor wasn't the cause but the excuse, and that simple human effort, which every man should be capable of, is the remedy evidenced by Annie's nephew and opposed by the guard at the end.
You know, I bet you'd look much cuter if you smiled.
What did you say?
This episode is also not subtle.
No.
And at this point, it's safe to say that subtlety is not really a part of the Jordan Peele Twilight Zone. I've seen some criticisms about the lack of subtlety, but unless you are 80 years old, you are not old enough to have personally experienced the exact cultural context of Serling's originals when they aired. Plenty of Serling fables were distinctly unsubtle. But where political messages are concerned, the 1960s was a more staid time for media subversion, and it speaks to the freedom of expression of our times that Peele does not need to be subtle and can go with more straightforward and accessible storytelling.
All it took was a few innocuous little rocks to turn men into monsters. Here, in the Twilight Zone.
Okay, let's talk about our favorite moments in this episode and least favorite moments. But to start things off, horror tropes 101. It had them all in here. The very first thing that happens in this episode, even before the opening crawl, is meteor shower. Uh-oh, it looks a little too close. Everything's falling.
Wait, what's going on?
What's going on here? And then immediately, let's go check it out.
I'm gonna pick it up.
I don't know, it might be radioactive.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, let's just try it.
I don't know,
Let's see
it
what
might have
happens.
space journeys.
Oh, really?
That part at the beginning where he touches the meteor totally reminds me of the segment in Creepshow where Stephen King is playing the character and he discovers a meteorite and like a total fool just like touches it and burns his hand. One of my favorite things about this episode was the casting. Ray Seahorn, if you ask me, is why Better Call Saul, my favorite series of last year, was so amazing. Also, bringing in Ike Barinholtz to play her menacing husband is fantastic. He was sort of the Parks and Rec, Chris Pratt-style lovable idiot in Mindy Kaling Mindy Project, another smart show, and he becomes perfectly monstrous here and out of type.
Honey, blow out the candles, but don't forget to make a wish.
Early in the episode, I really liked the calm moments, the yoga scene, and then when she's outside of the dinner party and she's in her car, just sort of spacing out for a moment. I like that those fit into that tropey calm before the storm, like in the zombie movies where you know that the breakout is happening or it's going on, it's building up, it's just not on screen right now. It's happening to other people and it's gonna boil over.
I love the structure of this episode, honestly. The writing was on point. I mean, the first line is, yes, sir, yes, Mr. Smith, yes. And then it just descends into chaos from that line. Yet, it stays focused throughout the entire episode. I love that.
It definitely goes, oh, it's getting worse. It's getting worse. It's getting worse. It's getting worse.
Like, even the biker scene didn't come out of left field. We clearly see this guy talking to Dylan early in the episode. It just comes back around. Good structure, good story.
That's actually a perfect example. The first time I watched it, I did think the biker scene was out of left field.
Nope.
And it's totally not.
I thought the use of Lionel Richie's Hello was great. I mean, right from the beginning, it's like an American Psycho moment where he puts on the song, and then at the end, they cap it off with him just dragging through the fog with his meteor, with the chain. I loved it.
Hello? Is it me you're looking for?
One scene that didn't quite gel for me is when the characters are all at the bar and they're sort of having this, kind of like catty conversation about the guys there.
Yeah.
It felt just a little underdeveloped for how well fleshed out I feel like a lot of the rest of the episode is. There's definitely room for dialogue about how women are complacent in the enabling of toxic male behavior, but I don't think this scene had enough meat to bring it all the way through.
No, they kind of rush through that to get to the next part, which is the chaos.
The chaos,
ensuing.
yes, it just builds up the chaos, basically, or to the chaos.
It felt good letting that guy have it.
Yeah?
Yeah. It felt real good.
But it's good that you're making it snow, Anthony. It's real good.
Now on to Easter eggs and references. This episode was a bit light in terms of
At least we
sneaking
think.
things in. There wasn't, we didn't see a gremlin,
No.
and there isn't as much of the sort of connected universe that we've been talking about in some of our other breakdowns.
Just Whipple news, it looks like.
Right, we got Whipple News featured most prominently in episode 5, Wonderkind, from this season, and also the Whipple Company itself has made an appearance in several episodes from Peele's revival.
And of course, that name Whipple is from the classic episode Brain Center at Whipple. The number 1015 shows up again, and the name right next to it looks like Dr. Romero. This is almost certainly a tribute to the legendary director George A. Romero.
That number 1015, of course, has appeared several times throughout the series so far.
Yes.
It was very prominent in Nightmare at 30,000 Feet. It was featured on a license plate in Replay, and a few variations on the number have appeared in some other places too.
We see a quick shot of another Busy Bee diner cup right here. This was also featured in the episode The Wonderkind, as well as the episode Replay. Now when it comes to the classic episodes of Twilight Zone, this one mostly resembles The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street for the most part.
Right, now you also mentioned horror tropes in zombie films earlier,
Yes.
and let's look a little bit more closely at some of the things this resembles. Many society breakdown stories where the sci-fi reason for exposing awful human nature drove the plot include the seminal undead tale by George Romero, Night of the Living Dead. There's also John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness and The Signal from 2007, to name a couple more. The Foggy Docks ending also reminded me a bit of The Fog, another town overrun story. And finally, to this point, hey, Us, Jordan Peele's latest film.
If you want to get crazy, we can get crazy.
Let us know what you thought about this episode down in the comments or hit us up on Twitter.
And we will see you all back here for episode 8 next week. Bye-bye.